Positional chess strategy from the highest level. We're gonna see a world chess championship game today, and you're gonna learn a little bit about how grandmasters actually think about positional chess strategy. And it's in the All Moves Explained series, and we're gonna go through both the Carlsbad structure and the isolated queen pawn structure. So it's a perfect example for positional chess strategy. Let's get going with this game between Liren Nepomniachtchi and Ding Liren. This is known as the Queen's Gambit Orthodox. We have had a lot about this on GM Talks, and I can recommend, for instance, the series on the Carlsbad structure. We have a whole course that's more than 2 hours long. So here the explanation starts. We have this structure after white's e3 here. So we have white has got, these structures against, you can say, these structures here. So the difference is that black has a c pawn more than white, and white has an e pawn more than black. That means that white has different plans, like the minority attack with b4 or the central attack with e4. So we are in this situation where the positional chess is about which plan white will choose and how black should counter this. On the other hand, black has gotten an open e-file, and you can see that it will not be so difficult for the bishops and knights and so on to come out. So we are looking for a heavyweight positional battle here. By the way, remember to sign up for the email. You find a link at the bottom here. Okay, here black plays an interesting move, h6, kicking the bishop immediately. So what's the upside and what's the downside for this? Well, the upside is the bishop has to move, and that's a little bit annoying, because if you go to here, then black will not play bishop e7, he'll play bishop d6. So winning a tempo with that move. And if it goes here, well, then it's already decided it's not going here, right? So you can't have both things. But it has upsides, but it also has downsides. And one of the downsides is that it weakens the white squared complex on black's king side, especially the g6 square, and actually also the f5 square, because it will have less this whole complex, if black plays g6, will have less support when the pawn is on h6. So it makes it much more difficult to move other pawns on the king side, and it's also make it, if for instance a white knight will appear here, then it will not be easy to expel it with f6, because then all the white squares are really weak, right? So this is the upside, but I think it might be the best move in the course on the Carlsbad. We have a little bit about this, but at the moment it's all the rage to play h6 very early with black. Castle and queen c2. So white is keeping the option to castle both sides, and even though he's not attacking anything here, he keeps this under firm control and prevents this bishop from getting to a nice good square. If it, for instance, if it goes here, then white would probably play knight here, right? And I should start using another color for the arrows. Sorry. Black plays rook e8, natural move into the open file, and maybe preparing knight e4, knight g e2. So this is known as the Botvinnik plan, and it's also been favored by Kasparov, and it's one of white's most aggressive line. White basically want to play f3 and e4, and thereby building a strong center, using his majority in the center to and later hopefully transform it into an attack on black's king. The f pawn might become weak when the f line is open, so it's all very dangerous for black, but it's not all bad for black. And I think this game is a model example of how black should counter this this line. So developing the knight, black castle, and here black plays a5, which is a little bit interesting move. It's against the minority attack, which we don't think he will play anyway. So it's a little bit strange that you go a5, but it's also preparing maybe b5, and also sometimes you can go a4, but overall it's just to keep the queen side back. So he's not afraid of f3 at the point. I would play f3 here with white. He plays a3. So sort of saying, okay, you played a5, I played a3. By the way, in general, you do not like to have the pawn on a5 if you're going to play c5. And why is that? Well, the point is, and it's kind of important, is that you lose control over the b5 square. So if you have not played a5 and a3, then you can play a6. You can just play a6 here and keep control over the b5 square. So when you're going for a plan with c5, and generally you don't want to play a5. Here comes an important move, knight h5, and white can choose to take on e7, or you can choose to move the bishop to d3. You don't want to do this. And why don't you want to do this? Well, in general, most players think that bishops are slightly more valuable than knights. This is an important concept in positional chess strategy, is that it's almost always the bishop who gets to choose if there will be an exchange. So, and try to think about it in different opening lines, like the exchange Spanish, white takes on c6, like in the Rosolo Lima, white takes on c6 as well, or in the Nimzo Indian, black takes on c3, or in the maybe Trompowsky, where white takes on f6. It's always white who's get the bishop who gets to choose. It's seldom that the knight can just take a bishop, and that's because most people deep down feels that the bishop is a slightly better piece than the knight. There are some positions where it's definitely not the case, but in general, you don't want to part with your bishop. So he takes here, and you could say that this exchange is sort of good for white, because this bishop here, black's bishop on e7, was the good bishop because all the pawns are on white. On the other hand, exchanges makes it easier for black to get his pieces out. He gets more room to maneuver, and to be honest, he's also closer to a draw with limited material. Taking back with the queen is natural, also putting more pressure on the e-file here. Rook a to e1, also very natural move. White's plan is definitely to go f3 and e4 and trying to get a pawn roller in the center. The problem here is this queen on e7 is threatening this pawn, so you can't just play f3. You have to move this knight before you play f3, which is not what you really want, because you actually want this knight to go here when this other knight here disappears, moves back. But black is very clever here. He keeps the knight on h5, keeps the e-file open, and so for instance, if here black played something like this, which would be a mistake, then after this white is already much better. He has access to this square, which we see that now h6 is not such a nice move to have played, and f3 is coming with e4 and so on. But black is very clever. He keeps the knight on h5 and play instead knight f8, getting ready to move the bishop out somewhere, and covering some of the white squares here. So you might play f6 one day, and preventing f3 because of just taking it. So in order to play f3, white has to play this move, and this was definitely not the point of the play for black. For white, the knight is going in the wrong direction. White's plan was to play f3, f3, e4, and after something like this, start an attack on f7 or h7 or g6, or maybe the bishop will go here, maybe the pawn will go up here, and the knight might appear on this square. Right, so this is what white is hoping for, to sort of run black over in an assault, and black is preventing, and the knight on c1 is not helping with that strategy. So this is good news for black. But please notice that if black, for instance, white is here instead, sets something like this move, then black will just take, and this also sort of stops white's attack from rolling, because after something like this, he could play something like this, which is also very annoying, because now f3 is not possible due to this move. So it is played very well by black in this situation, and knight c1 is definitely an admission for white that something is not going right. So knight f6 coming back. Now there's no knight d3, the knight could go back. They could play knight e2, but it makes no sense. He plays f3. He's ready for e4 now. The knight comes out, prevents e4 because d4 is hanging, so can't play e4. Knight comes here, defending here, maybe getting closer to here, and here black plays an important move, c5. So he does not allow the plan with e4. He does not allow the plan with green, and this is sort of the positional chess strategy that's going on, is about fighting for the center here, preventing white's plan of e4 and an assault on the king. So black plays very, very precisely, just the right timing. You could say that it's a little bit annoying that this hole is here, but you can't have everything. You also say that now we change from a Carlsbad structure to an isolated queen pawn position. We also have a big course on that kind of structure. It's a very important structure. It will arise in a range of openings, and here we can say that in general, when you have an isolated queen pawn, you have free play for your pieces, but you have a weak isolated pawn. Here, white structure is also a little bit messed up because this pawn is here and it looks kind of weak, right? So bishop b5. Natural move. White gives up all hopes of a kingside attack, an e5, and starts to play positionally now. So it's all about exploiting. Maybe this bishop will be bad, and maybe this pawn here will be weak. So that's what you're hoping to achieve. But black is kind of okay, active here, active pieces. There's also weaknesses in white camp here, the e3 pawn. And white takes, and bishop d2. All very natural moves. Black was threatening this pawn here, and here black plays this move, getting ready to exchange bishop. In general, in this position, if you exchange all the bishop, then with the knight, only a knight, the pressure, the problem with the isolated queen pawn position is not felt nearly as much with only knights. It's like they don't get bad like bishops do. So in general they don't. Sometimes they do, actually. Okay, here white make a mistake, and sometimes strategy mixes with tactics. In this position, something like, for instance, knight d4 is equal. I would say maybe slightly better for white, but nothing much. And I would suggest it would be a draw. Here, white makes a mistake. He takes on d7, and that looks natural. It looks why can't I just take on d7 and play knight d4 afterwards? What's the problem? The problem is that black does not play what I'm sure Nepo expected here. He expected black to take with the rook, defending the pawn on d5. Instead, black did this tactical smart thing, knight d7, and it's all based on this problem here, that for instance, after something like this, check, and king moves, then here, and black definitely have a strong initiative here, and you can just feel it. The knight is coming in, and it will be unpleasant for white. First of all, your queen is on attack here, right? So this is nasty stuff, and white is already, black is already clearly better. It's even worse to take with the other one, because after this one, you actually lose a knight, because there's now 1, 2, 3 threatening the knight, only one defender, and due to this pin, you can't play e4, so you simply lose the knight. So that would be a total disaster. That's not going to happen. So here, white cannot take the pawn, which was what he hoped for. He played knight e4. So what's changed? Well, the problem for white is that now the knight comes here, and we see that we thought that black has a weakness here, but there's actually more to it, because the knight can come here where it will attack b2 and e3 and maybe a3, because this one might be loose, right? So we see that the knight is much better here. So then when the knight is not needed on the king side, it's much better on this square. Rook d1, and this is, by the way, sound advice for white in positions like this. Hang on to your strong post. Don't panic, and try not to lose something, and then just hang on to that stuff. And that's what he does. So here and this here, maybe in knight a3, I'm not sure it works, but this looks natural. Black is clearly fine here. Very strong knight, very good knight here. Well, the pawn is weak here, but this pawn is also weak. So, and here, right? So there is a clear black initiative in this situation, and all dreams white had about attacking the guy sitting down here is all over. Queen, knight a4, good move. Queen go back, rook here, and here black had to play a little bit more decisively if you want to continue the game. He could, of course, white has to cover this pawn, and white is more or less just defending here. One move here is to just take this one, and if you take back with the pawn, then queen, maybe f6 or something. Black is having more fun. This knight is better than this knight. And if the rook takes, then maybe something like b5, and this could be a little bit interesting in knight c3, knight take b3 or a3 or something. This is not completely nonsense. This is a little bit interesting, and could be potentially scary for white. This was not, he played queen f6, natural move, putting more pressure on d5, and we have the X-ray effect going all the way down to b2 along with the knight, and of course white is fine here. Black plays this move, and I think they more or less was agreed to a draw. More in sort of, it's not like they agreed to a draw. It's just like they played this move, and they both realized I cannot win this game, so they went back and forth here. But a very instructive game, and definitely worth going through. And I'm sure you learned a lot about both the Carlsbad structure, the isolated queen pawn structure, and positional chess strategy for both sides. So white's plans got thwarted. He didn't get to play e4, and had to play the sort of not fitting in with the plan, knight c1. After that, black had no problems. A nice game by Ding, who went on to win the next game, and at the moment it's 2-2, and we have a very exciting World Chess Championship match ahead of us. This was GM Talks. Thank you for watching, and remember to sign up for that email list. Thank you.